Okay. So welcome everyone to this AuthorAID webinar, Proposal Writing Basics. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm just going to quickly talk through some housekeeping rules. It would be great if you could all keep yourself on mute unless you're asking a question today. If you have any technical issues, feel free to email me at abat.inasp.info or AuthorAID@inasp.info, or also post in the chat if you have any technical problems. During the Q&A, we will be asking questions. So if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand using the participant panel, and then we'll select some participants to ask some questions to our speaker. And just for your information, this webinar will be recorded today. So if you have a problem with that, please do let us know and we'll be able to sort that out for you. But I'm just going to hand over to today's chair, Dilshani, to tell you more about our speakers.
Thank you so much, Alaka. A very safe day to all of you who are joining with us today. I welcome all of you again to the session. We are all in a situation in which uncertainty creeps in very often. Sometimes, questioning our survival as humans. We as researchers need to really look at the ways that we can contribute to sustain humanity. We would need to restructure our thinking patterns when we are hoping to find solutions, create new knowledge. Whether it's medical treatments, economy, agriculture, sociology, education, whatever the field, we need to be ready. And funding is going to be tight. So if we want to turn our research ideas into an actionable proposal, we need to revisit, revise, and improve. So the objective of the session today, the author has decided to invite all of you to discuss and to revise as to how to structure a research proposal, and also to discuss the ways that we can overcome challenges as researchers when we are structuring a research proposal. For that, we invited a group of experts, 3 experts. First, we have Professor Leonorah. She's an associate professor of education, management, and policy studies with expertise in research methods, teacher development, gender equality, and curriculum development. Over the past 21 years, she has worked in higher education institutions in South Africa, India, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. She's currently attached to the Faculty of Education of the Zimbabwe University. She's going to talk to us about structuring grant proposals. Over to you, Leonorah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to share. Let me try and get my okay. This is what I'm going to share with you today. This, for me, is coming from a personal experience for the past 10 to 15 years, where I have tried to get into consultants as part of my community work in the university. So my topic is structuring grant proposal. Right. What I understand about a grant proposal, it is a very clear, direct document written to a particular donor organization or funding agents with the purpose of persuading the organization to provide you with financial support. So normally, we don't get support in kind, but when we make a proposal, we are looking for funding in terms of the money. And what I understand about funding, it is an act of providing financial resources to support a program, a need, or a project. For example, I could do have a project that we have from my community work, like whole school improvement in rural settings. So this could be a call put on by an organization. And it is not about one country. It is rural setting in any country who can respond to the call. Now, I've realized in my experience that there are types of grants, which are research grant, project, thesis writing, dissertation writing, conference, travel grant, collaborative grant. It can be external grant or internal grant. When I talk of internal grant, I'm talking of a grant that is coming from within the institution. Now, I have also learned that there are two organizations, the grant-seeking organization and the grant funding organization. But these two, from my experience, are working together to solve a problem. And the one who proposes that here is a problem is the person or the organization writing the proposal. I have realized that when you want to make a proposal, you need to understand the concept of proposing. And you also need to understand the concept of competition, because you are not the only one who is seeking a grant for solving a problem. So I have that in mind, and that has helped me during my proposal writing. I will give you an example of a problem that we can have. That is a school, and if I am in the community, I see that as a problem. And when maybe Bill Gates' organization puts up a call to say, we wanted to fund projects of whole school improvement, I should be able to articulate my problem. If they have said they are funding the concept of whole school improvement. So I have to understand the problem, and the donor also needs to understand the problem that I am articulating. Now, there are two options for writing a grant proposal. I have seen that you can write a cold funding proposal where I'm saying you research the funding organizations, you look at what they fund, and you can write your proposal. They normally say, we accept proposals twice a year, and they give you the parameters or the months where they close the first proposal for that year and the second proposal for that year. So normally that you do as a cold proposal during the 6 months that they are accepting. Then you can also respond to a call for proposal. But in all these two cases, you have to structure the proposal to align with the donor's terms of reference, or you can call it their vision, or you can call it their mission, but you have to understand the donor's requirements. Now, why structure your proposal? I have learned that we have to structure the proposal to develop a specific, meaningful, actionable plan for your project in alignment with the donor. I have to structure it so that I make sure I win the grant. I also have to structure the proposal so we have an important and a fully considered plan to advance a valuable cause, valuable to the donor and valuable to the organization, the funding, the organization seeking the fund. Now, you are also going to structure, because you must show that you are a responsible organization, you are capable of realizing that which you have planned, and that which you have planned is aligned to the donor organization. Now, I have come up with the steps that one can follow in writing the proposal, and especially if you are responding to a call. The first and foremost thing is to read and understand the theme, sub-themes, purpose, and objectives for the call. There is always a document that you have to read and understand. Now, you also need to understand the scope and the funding duration. You also need to understand or know the donor. What exactly do they fund vis-a-vis your problems that you want to solve? Then you also need to have clarity of why your organization is writing this proposal, and also have clarity of the eligibility of your organization to apply for this fund, and you have to follow the guidelines. You also need to know your weaknesses and the strengths as an organization or as individuals who are writing the proposal. You need to understand the context and setting and objectives of your organization and those of the donor organization. You need to design the project that align with the terms of reference of the organization. And then you need to match the project to the interest and concerns of the donor organization. Then the project must address the donor's mission while also addressing your organization's identified problem. Now, I wanted to talk about what I understand about the capabilities of the team. Usually, you make a team from your organization that is seeking funding. And what I have experienced is within the organization, you need to identify the qualified and or skilled members who are going to make a team. There should be, but not limited to, one with a credible track record of. These four, I have found them to be very important, mainly because, say in universities, proposals are done in faculties or in departments, but you might find that in my faculty or in my department of education, there is no one who is very, very well versed with the financial management, which is a critical component in a proposal writing. And then you need someone who understands what project impact is, and the technical competence, as well as general management ability. Within the team, we need people with such skills. Now, what am I saying? What have I learned? I have learned that structured grant proposal should advance a valuable cause, valuable to my organization, which is seeking the fund, and valuable to the organization that has the money that they can spare for us to do the project. I need to be very specific and clearly articulate in support with the donor terms of reference, vision, and mission. And this proposal that I'm writing as a structured grant proposal should follow the donors' guidelines religiously. And as we write, we should use exact headings provided by the core or the donor. And then we need to be creative, persuasive, technically detailed, and correct, especially in terms of language. However, having said all this and learned all these lessons, I have also observed that there are other factors that militate against good proposal writing. We are not guaranteed to win the grant even after all that I have said, because there are factors which are like politics of the donor funding organization. There are also concepts of nepotism. There are also concepts of tribalism. So I have taken it that proposal writing, grant proposal writing is a game of numbers. You need to write and write. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Leonorah, for that excellent presentation and giving some important insights as to the things that we need to remember when we are preparing a proposal, especially following donors' guidelines religiously. Next up, we have Dr. Bernard Appiah. I think there was one question on chat inquiring whether we are going to talk on proposals for ethical review. Today, our slant is more on grant application because we realize that it's more relevant to the current scenario. But whatever you learn through the discussions, through the presentations are relevant for ethical review applications as well. So we'll be focusing mainly on grant applications, but you can ask questions related to ethics also. So next I'm inviting Bernard, Dr. Bernard Appiah, who is a Ghanaian public health professional and a science journalist with a passion for teaching, research, and service. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Public Health in Fall College, Syracuse University, US. His research focus is on translational communication science to influence population health practice and policy in low-income and minority population in the US and beyond. Bernard is going to talk to us on when and how to decide to respond to a call for grant proposals. Over to you, Bernard.
Thank you very much. Let me share my slides. Okay. Hi. Yes, for me as a science journalist and also as a researcher, this topic is very, very key. And so the goal of this presentation is to, help you to decide on when to respond and how also to respond to such calls. Now, as you rightly heard, if you see my name, you will know I am from Ghana. So I wouldn't want to go much about that. But by the end of this presentation, I really want you to know how and then when to decide. Now, let's say, you have just identified a call for a proposal. You have to make a decision whether to submit or not to submit. And for that to occur, there are some things that need to go through your mind. So I will help you to, get to know more about that. So one issue is, with the time. Typically, they will give you a deadline. Now, let me also say that some proposals have a rolling deadline. So in that case, you can always decide when you are ready. But in many calls, you will be expected to adhere to the deadline. So you ask yourself, with this deadline, do I have enough time? Also, if you are going to involve collaborators, which typically some grant proposals require you to have, then you also have to consider the time that your collaborator may potentially also have. Now, there are some other things you could consider about the time. The time could be not just about the writing, but even time to think about what you have to write about. So if you factor all this into the equation, it sometimes becomes very necessary that you weigh the decision to submit and then, of course, not to submit. Then another thing you have just heard is the alignment. Does the call for the proposal align with your expertise and goals? And here, it could be the fact that maybe they are calling for something, a topic that you have been researching on, you have been studying, and so you have the expertise in. So that fits in very well. Also, if you have a team, of course, one person cannot have all the requirements depending on the type of grant. So if it is not a dissertation grant or a fellowship grant, which typically has a focus more on the individual applying than a team, and it's more like a collaborative grant or a team-based type of grant, you also have to look at what your team, their expertise and the goals, the objectives, whether they align with what the funder is asking you, to respond to. Now, from experience writing grants, some of the calls, as soon as you see it, you know that, they have found me and my team. This is perfect for me. That is a eureka moment. So you ask yourself, does this call look like it was probably made mainly for me and my team? If it matches very well, then that certainly looks great. Now, in terms of alignment also, sometimes as you just heard, grant organizations have their objectives, their goals, their missions. And then also you may have your own mission. So you really want to be sure that that alignment is certainly great. And if that happens, then it's like they have found you. That is where you say, this is it. Now I'm going to go for it. Then also, for some of the grants I have personally written, I did not need any institutional approval. For example, like the Gates Foundation, they have this grant challenges, aspirations type of grant course. Typically, you just may need to provide the contact information of your institutional person who may handle grant. But other than that, you just submit without any institutional approval. If that happens, then sometimes it's very easy if you are deciding in terms of what is required or not. But in some other proposals, like for example, in the US, we have the US National Institute of Health, it's more institutional type of approval that you would need. And then sometimes some of those grants, you will also require even letters of support, like, of course, some Wellcome Trust organization, or also like if you are writing grants to the Wellcome Trust, they require institutional approval, and something I have also written to before, so you have to look into all these things for you to decide, because that can also weigh into whether you have enough time or not. And then also sometimes you will need external collaborator. For some of the grants, I remember the Gates Foundation grant that I wrote, and likely by God's grace, I was successful. I needed a collaborator from Ethiopia because I wanted to do the project in Ethiopia. I didn't have one, and I had to look for one. So sometimes you will need that, and you have to be very tactful in terms of who you bring on board, and those are very, very key, because if you are bringing in a collaborator, you want to see whether that collaborator complements your skill set or that of your team. sometimes what I have seen is that people want to satisfy their friends. So they pat their colleagues on a team. And if you look at the proposal, you don't see the differences in terms of expertise. If you are bringing a collaborator, make sure that that person complements your skill set and that of your team, and not necessarily adding on to just because you want to satisfy. So these are some of the things that obviously you would have to be very, very careful about. Then in terms of deciding how, you ask yourself, why me? Why us? And why now? And this is something that you craft carefully in such a way that a reviewer and the funder may have the need, the urge to say, let's fund these people because it's really a great call. I mean, a great proposal. Then also you look at the previous recipient of the grant, if they are available. Sometimes some of the organizations may provide information about previous recipients. That can be very, very helpful, because sometimes when you look at the caliber of people who are getting it, you ask yourself, oh, am I in that kind of category? You know, so it's always helpful to check if that is possible. Also, you want to seek opinions of people you trust. And here, trust is very important. At the time of deciding to write a grant, you know, you haven't even written it yet. So if you discuss with someone you don't trust, that person could even take your idea and you could be in trouble, you know, all competing for the same type of grant. So you have to be very careful. You know, a little joke is like when you are, you know, if you are very much interested in somebody and then you talk to a friend who may also be interested in the person, you know, and you don't go early. Sometimes, you know, depending on how things go, you could be in serious, you know, trouble. So you have to make sure you trust the person before you go into discussing with that person. And then you ask yourself, is this a one-off call for proposal? Of course, some proposals, you can see that they have crafted in such a way that after that is done, that is it. There won't be additional ones. Some too is periodic. So sometimes even in a year, we have like 3 times, for example, in the Wellcome Trust, you know, they have some grants that have different deadlines within a certain year. And so that one you can always prepare and then decide to submit or not. Sometimes also, you can look at the number of grants they are offering. So for me, sometimes what I do is if I see a proposal and they are giving 1 or 2, I look at the amount they are giving, and then I look at the fact that they're giving to only 1 or 2 people. I haven't managed like, you know, 200 million or 20 million of, you know, so you have to be very careful so that you don't even waste your time. If you just have 1 or 2 grant they are giving and you look at the things they're asking you to do, don't waste your time, because sometimes, I mean, if you think you are not ready, you know, sometimes you may be the only one who will go for it. That is great, go for it. But be careful in responding to calls with large amount of money with fewer grants that are available, because sometimes you may not be the best fit for it. But it's also possible that depending on how you craft it, you could compete very well. So in the end, in deciding, I say you call the shot. So when you are deciding to submit, just make sure that, you know, the decision that you make, you are happy about it. You know, if you decide not to submit it, you could equally be very happy, because the time you invest into writing and knowing that even after writing, you are not going to get it, you know, that type of time, you can use it for other ventures. So in any decision that you make regarding whether you submitted or not, just be happy about it. And then also when the people are funded, assuming you didn't submit and the people get funded, you know, go back there and see those who have gotten. And sometimes when you look at it, you say, oh, great, I'm happy I didn't submit. There was no way, you know, I was going to get this grant. So yeah, I just want to, you know, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with you, and we look forward to getting your questions to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for that thought-provoking and based on your experience, it's a reflective presentation. I'm sure a lot of you benefited from that. There was one question also that we will discuss later after Taddese's presentation. And also, if for any one of you having technical issues in hearing or visualizing the presentations. We'll be sharing the recording with you all, so don't worry about that. So next we have Taddese Zerfu to talk to you about common mistakes in proposal grant writing and recommended actions. So Taddese is a postdoctoral fellow in the Global Academy of Agriculture and Food Security, University of Edinburgh, UK. He has served as a clinician, assistant professor of public health, human nutrition, a senior research advisor to the Ministry of Health in Ethiopia, and he is the winner of the 16th Cho Godel Research Prize, a prestigious award given to a young researcher in Ethiopia who write papers on topics related to infectious and non-infectious diseases. Over to you, Taddese.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Here it is. Good afternoon. I don't know what is. I don't know. So my talk of presentation is common mistakes in proposal writing and recommended actions. This is based on my experience as a reviewer of grantors and also writing proposals, and also based on a research finding or based on evidence. So I'll share you some of the experiences I have based on my experience in the research on what is a common mistake that grant writers or proposal writers make and what are the possible remedies to this. I will structure my presentation in two components. The first is the general mistakes, or like non-specific issues based on the grantors. And the second one is specific section by section mistakes, which most sorry. Hello. Okay. So what are the specific common issues which most common grant writers make based on section by section of the proposal? So if I start with the first, or the general mistakes, the first one is compliance rules and guidelines. In every call for proposals or for grants, each organization or donors have their own rules and guidelines. You have to read those guidelines. They are very important, because what most grant writers don't know is that it's not the technical expert that usually reviews your proposal. There are in-house screening before your proposals are screened by a technical expert. You may feel that you have a very novel idea which could be funded or sponsored, but and could easily convince the technical expert. But before it gets to the technical expert, some admin expert who is not well expertise with the issue might screen out your proposal because of adhering to guidelines. So the first thing in most grant funding is in-house screening by an admin or non-technical expert. So make sure that you have made all those guidelines. Even if you have a novel idea, an idea that could easily win the grant, you could not be funded because not adhering to rules and the guidelines. So adherence to policies, procedures, accreditations, and other previous experience or formatting are very important to win a proposal. And this is something very silly, but very, very important. Cognizant of this one, the second one is also adherence to specifications. There are some specifications, unlike the rules, there are also specifications that grant donors usually have in terms of SI units, in terms of different specifications could be there based on the proposal. So you have to adhere to those specifications. They are there for a reason. Not, sometimes you may consider that the main thing is the idea, but not only the idea. Following or adhering to those specifications is also very important. It's an important step in securing a grant contract. And the third one is failing to add value. Most research grants are competitive. Now you have to bear in mind that there are a lot of competitors. So to get granted or to get the grant, you must add value what is new in my proposal. You have to make sure that you have added something which can make you preferable or which can attract your donors. Otherwise, having a very normal or meeting the requirements is not enough to get funded. So you have to make sure that you have added value in addition to what is required. That is very important. Most writers they usually worry about meeting the requirements, meeting what is required in the guidelines and in the specifications, but also think of adding value. What you have to add some new thing, innovative, into your proposal that will help you to win other competitors easily. The third problem, which is commonly faced by most grant writers, is copy and paste. As Appiah was saying, you may submit a proposal and you may not be funded. Don't use that proposal to submit to another funding. Don't. It's a big mistake. It's a big no. Because one thing, even if the call is relevant to the other one, there are some specifications and there are different ways of presenting the proposal. I've seen many grant writers who are submitting, even having the names or some clues which has been used by another grant, submitting directly, copying and pasting and submitting to a new proposal. So that is a big no. You have to reuse the old content. You have to rewrite it and update it than simply copying and pasting and submitting to a new grant. And also avoid copy and paste from any other ideas. Plagiarism is also said. So most grant donors have their own ways of checking for authenticating the content of your proposal. So try to avoid plagiarism and also even self-plagiarism, and also submitting a proposal which is written for a different purpose to another one. So that is another important mistake and you should avoid. The fifth one is reviewing a submission. What we have seen from a study is that most grant writers, they don't get others' comment before submitting because of various reasons which have been mentioned in that study. The first reason is fear of being stolen of an idea and also not trusting the colleague. But before submitting your proposal, make sure that someone else, an outsider, reviewed your proposal, because there is what we call outsiders or fresh view. You may not see some of the mistakes, some of the things that could easily be picked by an outsider. So make sure that a colleague or someone else reviewed your proposal before submitting, which helps you to win the grant easily. And most of the writers are not doing this one because of various reasons, but try to do this as part of your proposal writing. The other is getting a feedback. Now, if you don't get funded in one proposal, don't just be frustrated. Be courageous enough to ask, getting a feedback. Ask them what was the weakness of my proposal and what was the strengths. This will help you to know the weakness of your proposal, and also helps you to get funded for the next round of proposal writing. So requesting a feedback is very important. Most grant writers, they don't get feedback, so they don't ask for the donor to get a feedback. It's good to get a feedback. Of course, most of the donors also, they don't have the trend of giving specific feedbacks, but make your habit to get a feedback from the donor. Ask them what was the mistake, what was my weakness, why it was not funded. They usually give you some comment. Based on that, you can correct it and you can also learn from it, and you can easily win the next round of funding. The last and the seventh common mistake was academic qualification mixed in number of authors. According to studies, the higher the qualification, the higher the possibility of success. It's good to get people with higher academic rank in your team, especially the PI and the key people should be people of higher qualification. This is not because these people have special or they are the ones who can only make funded, but the donors will also take attention to who is going to work on this activity. So the higher the qualification, the possibility of the success is higher. You can influence the donors. And also the number of authors or the number of grant proposal writers is also very important. It's good to have higher number and multiple mix of authors than having one or two people writing it, because it also has an effect, not only your idea, but also who is going to do is also very important for a grant to be winning. I think these are the general things. I'm rushing for the interest of time. Now let's see some of the specific issues. The first one is related to the problem identification. Whenever you write a proposal, you have to keep these three things in mind. The first thing is innovativeness. When I say innovativeness, you're not going to write a proposal for a Nobel Prize, but what I'm saying is you have to have some new way of doing things. It could be similar, but you have to add some value to it, which I've said it earlier. So innovativeness is not having a novel idea or an idea which is not known to others, but the way you write it, the way you present it, the way you think about it should be different from what is commonly known or from the normal way of doing it. The second one is the relevance is very important. When you identify a problem, make sure that it's relevant to the call. I have seen several proposals which are very well written and with a very good methodology, but not relevant to the call. So relevance is very important. And also should address the least addressed problems. People usually have common interests, we know, but try to work on those issues or ideas which are least addressed or which are least investigated, which will help you to get in convincing the donors and also funded easily, than having repeating or most addressed problems. Try to find least addressed problems. Coming to the title, I've seen several proposals with very clumsy and huge, bulky titles, but title should be catchy and attractive, very important, because the title is the gate to your paper, your proposal. If you just have a very clumsy title or a title which is not reflecting what you intend to do, the donors will be missing you. So the title is very, very critical. And most decisions could be made even by the title, by the way. So the title is very important. It has to be catchy. Take your time. You can have a draft title, but before you submit, make sure that your title is catchy enough. It is human beings that is going to review your proposal. So you have to work more on the title, even compared to the content. So the title is very important. And it should be specific and use fewer words. Don't use like more than 15 to 20 words. I've seen a title with 3 lines, which is very clumsy and not interesting. Even if your idea is novel, even if you have a very good proposal, the title is very important. You have to use catchy and attractive title. In the introduction, some people think that the introduction is not like a very critical part, but it is very critical because it shows how much your work is relevant and how much you know the gap. So it should be clear and focused, and you have to use simple and clear language and use the latest references or citations in writing a proposal in your introduction, because it shows how much you are up to date and you know the recent scientific findings than using older scientific citations. And also avoid casual writing. You have to use smart writing. The other is a problem statement. Stick to presenting clear and relevant problems than presenting general problems which are not relevant, or problems which are not pertinent to the call. Try to present clear and relevant and focused problems, because the reviewers will be lost if you are just talking something very not relevant and you are talking many problems. So focused and should be relevant. Objectives, of course, objectives should be smart, but they have to be also clear and pertinent. That means you have to write your objectives in such a way that you can easily attract and you can accomplish There are some proposal writers who are very ambitious and want to do a lot of things, but that will not make you successful. To be successful, you have to make sure that you can complete in time, it's measurable, and also it is smart or specific. Otherwise, if you are ambitious or if it's not specific, the reviewer says this guy is kidding. He can just refuse or can consider you that you are not serious. So you have to be, the objective should be smart. Literature review, I think unless and otherwise it is specified, it is good to have a literature review which is appropriate and adequate and also focused. There are some proposals which do not require literature review and should be specified. Otherwise, it's good to have an up-to-date and timely reviewed proposal or literature review in your proposal. I'm coming to the end. The hypothesis, I think you know about the hypothesis, and what you have to know is it should be relevant and testable. No, hypothesis should be, by its very nature, should be testable. Don't write a hypothesis which is not testable. I've seen several hypotheses which are not testable, which are not going to be verified at the end of the project. So they should be relevant and testable and should be presented adequately, and also avoid omitting the hypothesis because it is a very critical component of your proposal. And should be articulated comprehensively and clearly so that the reviewers will be convinced and your proposal is selected. The methods, I think this is a very critical component of your proposal. So it should be very appropriate. That means you have to use appropriate methods than having methods which are not convincing or not appropriate to the research proposal. For example, if the research is on a qualitative approach, you have to use qualitative approach. If you are exploring a new idea, than using a quantitative approach because you like it. So it has to be appropriate and clear. In some cases, appropriators may be used, but they are not clearly presented. So clarity is very important, and you have to use scientific approach. There are some people who say, I will take 20 people and do something. No, you have to use scientific approach, scientific procedures, not because you have an idea. Unless it is scientific, it will not be accepted. And sampling procedures should be explained, and you have to use appropriate sampling techniques. And finally, you have to use appropriate and acceptable data analysis techniques, which are up to date and also using state-of-the-art approach. I think these are the common mistakes and the common problems, but I'm very much happy to talk to you in the question and the answer if you have issues to be clarified. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Taddese, for that informative presentation. You covered the basics of proposal writing while addressing mistakes that we commonly do when we are applying for grants. And those can actually cause failure, as Bernard also mentioned. Now the floor is open for discussions. You can ask questions by raising your hand, and Alaka will detect you and allow you to ask questions. And you can also post your questions on the chat, and we'll answer the questions. So there was one question for Bernard in the chat. Bernard, the question was, how important is this letter of recommendation or the letter of support from the institution when you are applying for grants?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you so much for the question. I have also been reviewing grant applications, and some of the grants, sometimes they want to see the extent of support from the organization. And what sometimes I see is that the letter of support is so general. Oh, Dr. Appiah is a senior, is an assistant professor here. We would like him to get this grant, and we think it's going to be very helpful for the organization. Just like that. I mean, not much information. So in that kind of letter, if the grant application also requires that there is some kind of support from the organization, that is not even there. So what I find it to be very helpful is that if you want a letter of support to be unique to your proposal, you should consider, if possible, that is, if your organization is not used to writing these things, consider looking at what the call is asking for and then draft it to match the things that they are asking for, and make sure that you don't just put in some information there just to get the money. Make sure if you're going to say that, oh, we are going to have an office for this work, that office will be available eventually when you get the grant. Don't just put it there because that will help you to win the grant. Because I think the common mistakes people do is that they don't really value the letter so well. And so sometimes the letter comes in at the last minute. And I've written a grant application that actually I forgot to attach, one of those, letters of support that I've got because I submitted it in the last minute. And trust me, I didn't get the grant. So those minor things can be very, very, very important. And again, if a letter of support is required as part of the application, make sure that when you have the application ready to be submitted, you check and be sure that the letter is there. In the subsequent one, I got it, but you may not be that lucky to go for a second chance. So letter of support is very important, but especially if it is written with that particular project as a perspective. It shouldn't be a letter that can be written for anyone, just like that. No, it has to be unique to the core, and that will make it more important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I think you answered that question very well. I will quickly add a little bit to that. Now, if you are attached to an institution, though you are applying for a grant as an individual, sometimes the grant usually comes to the institution. So the infrastructure, the support that is available for the applicant is very important when a funding body decides on giving the grant. So those letters, the recommendations are very important, as Bernard said. I think we have Virginia. Virginia has raised her hand. Virginia, over to you. You can ask your question.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much for organizing this and to all the speakers of the day. So I have two questions for Bernard. The first one is regarding collaborators. Okay, being an early career researcher, I would like his input on how do you go about establishing collaborations with people who you have never met and where you have to search the internet for them and then introduce yourself. So what's the best way of making them confident in that they can work with you? That's my first question. Then second question is, as an early career researcher, maybe post-PhD, one is looking to start up your own research and all that. How do you go about identifying, let's say, a good place to start in terms of winning grants, an area of research? Could you go to your PhD and find a gap, or what could you suggest? I hope my questions were clear. There were two questions. Thank you.
Bernard, I think both questions were asked.
Thank you for your questions. I think my colleagues may come in. I'm sure they may also have some ideas. But I think for the first one, in terms of identifying a collaborator, what I find it to be very helpful is to look at the kind of research you are conducting. You read a lot about other people's projects. So from that, you get to know people who may be very good at what they do. And those are the people that sometimes you could get information from. Let me give you an example. In the Gates grant, which I got to do a project in Ethiopia, I didn't have any collaborator in Ethiopia at the time, but I had to search. So I just put in, I want to Google, put in the focus I wanted, like, maternal and child health, telephone number, something like that. And then some names came up. So I was able to do that. And then luckily the person had a mobile number I could just call quickly. And then I introduced myself in a concise manner. Now, I would suggest that when you first want to introduce yourself to somebody you do not know, don't give all the ideas in that email or in that call, for example. So I said, like, if you want to do a specific project to promote childhood vaccination, you can say, I am planning to do a communication intervention to promote childhood vaccination. And I see your work as relevant to what I do. And so I'll be happy to explore the feasibility of working with you. Don't say, I want to collaborate with you. You just want to explore, because sometimes when you talk with a person, you realize that, no, this is not, you don't want to commit yourself right away. So it's a strategy. It's a matter of time, and experience also counts. But I think if you ask, the only way is to also ask. If you don't ask, you won't get. And then in terms of for early career, researcher, and getting to know what to write, the grant, I think one of the things you have to do is to consider registering with some, grant websites. Sometimes when they give a call, something comes up. Sometimes if you belong to an association or maybe some network, they send some information through their group emails, and those are options. If you're in a very good institution, also institutions tend to bring up some potential calls. So there are different options to consider, but because of lack of time, I think if at a different time you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to help you more. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard. Leonorah, Taddese, do you have anything to add to this answer, Bernard's answer?
I think I can. There was a question from from someone, I think, on the chat, whether similar grant and academic proposals are the same or not. I could add on that. These two types of proposals have something in common. Also, they have their own differences. Because for academic proposal, you usually focus on the methodology, which is research for mainly for academic purpose, and this outline, the scope and the depths is also quite different from a grant. A grant proposal is usually for implementation, so it is a bit different. The timeline, the professional mix, and also the depths of the work could be different, and even the duration could be different. So they have something in common, but they are a bit different. But the problems are commonly happening in both types of grants: academic grant and also a grant for a research purpose, for a grant for a project. So this is what I can say about the two types. As far as the collaborator is concerned, I think Appiah have said it very well. But the best way to get a collaborator is to look for professionals who have published or who have projects in similar work, and you can contact them through their work. And ResearchGate, LinkedIn, and other medias could be important platforms to access those professionals. And you can use also university websites to get collaborators. I know, as he said, it's not easy to get a collaborator, but you can get very promisingly, you can get several collaborators easily. And the first thing is to introduce yourself, then share your idea, both not every details, as he said, but also tell them that you look for the collaborator for a reason, which is because of the reason you have your own in mind, so that you will get or convince the collaborator. Because sometimes some people may be worried if you are writing them as a sort of other conditions. So it's important to explain yourself and also write the purpose of the collaboration. I think.
Thank you. I think we have one more question from the person on the device, TechnoSpark. If you've got your hand raised, you can ask your question. The person on the device, TechnoSpark, who has their hand raised.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling from Cameroon. Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I'm calling from Cameroon. Okay. I just want to appreciate your effort and for the excellent presentation so far. I do have a serious problem at the moment. I'm working on a topic which I consider my project on how to develop the practice of insolvency in Cameroon. It has been so difficult, one, for two reasons. First is getting people who are conversant of the area. And secondly, on getting a grant in order to implement this project. So I want to find out, how do I go about this? Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Yeah. So do one of the speakers want to
Yes.
answer this question?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. So thank you so much for your question. You have a solution, and you don't have a lot of people who can potentially help you move forward, but also you are looking for ways to address the issue by way of funding. I think that, you know, when you have an issue like that, one of the things to consider is to consider local funding, if possible. It could be within your institution, or in which case they will give you some small amount of money to do something and then publish it. So when you publish it and it becomes known, sometimes it's easier to make a case for it. But if any issue could be important to any particular person, but you know, funders also have their priorities. So sometimes, you know, funders may not necessarily push for your priority. You have to keep looking. And especially in like in low and middle income countries, for example, sometimes some organizations beyond the bigger ones, like, you know, Gates and others, could be in the country to support. So they may, you know, then you can work on a proposal and consider in a local funding first. And if that works, you can then move ahead and look at it internationally, because it's difficult to really convince a funder that, hey, my project is good, consider funding it, when it is not part of a core that they are willing to support. So I understand the challenges you're going through, but I think if you look at it locally and in terms of, you know, seeking support, you know, look beyond, also consider looking beyond your institution. And like, you know, Taddese, you know, mentioned, you know, look at some published work of others and consider introducing the idea, of course, not the detail, and see to the extent to which some people may become interested. And then hopefully you may get support from there, and then you can move gradually. But it's not easy straight away getting, you know, like foreign or bigger grant to support it. Try, you know, locally first and see how that works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I think we're coming towards the end of the session. Alaka, do we have time for another question or two? Or?
Yeah, we can go ahead and ask a couple more questions.
I saw one hand up, but I think I lost that one. I think there were questions on academic writing. I think Bernard and Taddese all covered that. I think we can have another webinar on academic writing and to see how we can. But now I think we covered a lot on academic writing also through our talks. Academic writing and grant writing, they don't differ that much. It's that there are some changes in relation to whether you're applying for a postgraduate degree, whether you're applying for ethical clearance, and whether you're applying for funding. But the structure, it will be almost the same. I think other than that, another question is whether it's okay to have a whole proposal, said proposal prepared and then look for funding, or whether we are going to have the proposal done after the institution or the funding body is called for funding. I think Leonorah will be able to advise us on that. I think we could probably take another question or two till Leonorah answers that question.
Thank you for that question. I think my experience has been that cold funding is very feasible. But what you need to do is to adhere to their deadlines and their terms of reference, which mainly you find on their website. The organization will put all the information on their website. And if you do that and they follow what they are saying and they keep to their deadlines for their application, you can actually get them. If my memory serves me well, I have 2 organizations that I have worked with, and they have each received a grant out of putting what they have as their problem, which suits what the funding organization is giving. So I find it works if you really sit down and do the writing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Leonorah. Alaka, what shall we do? We can see another hand up. Emma, I think Emma wants to ask a question.
Yeah, Emma, if you wanted to ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I think now the hand is down. So probably Emma decided to ask that later. Alaka, so I think we can wind up now. Thank you so much to the 3 experts, Leonorah, Bernard, and Taddese, for educating everybody on how to apply for grants and how to prepare and structure a proposal, how to get through, how to decide and not to decide, but still be happy. And then the mistakes that we may make and how to overcome these mistakes also when applying for grants. And thank you all for joining. And Alaka has some important news to share. So over to you, Alaka.
Yes, so thank you very much, Dilshani, and thank you for chairing, and to all our speakers. Just to share that we have an upcoming AuthorAID MOOC, which starts on the 7th of September on research and proposal writing in the sciences. You can find out more on AuthorAID.info and on our social media as well. And we'll be sharing the recording of today's session via email, but you can also continue the discussion on our Google Groups forum as well. And follow us on all social media. But thank you very much, everyone. And we'd like to apologise for any technical issues that some people had whilst joining the webinar. But thanks very much. And we hope to see you at some of our next webinars soon.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.